everyone. Welcome back to Title IX Insider. Today we have a special guest joining us from Ditch the Label. His name is Dominic Arnall. Dominic, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to just introduce yourself, and then from there we'll just jump in and start having our conversation.
Wonderful. And thank you so much for having me. My name's Dominic Arnall, and I'm Chief Executive of Ditch the Label. And Ditch the Label is a global young people's organization, really focused on that intersection between technology, young people, and mental health. We do a sort of few things to support this. So we complete research, looking at the way technology is shaping young people's lives. We have education programs around the world where we work with schools and teachers and young people to get them to really think about that impact and work on it in a way that makes sure that young people are not just done to in the part of the conversation. They're kind of leading the conversation. And we have support services to work with young people who have been exposed to difficult content online that has caused them trauma. We provide mentoring, we provide counseling to make sure that they get the support and the help they need.
That's amazing. Thank you. And for everyone out there, please be sure you like and subscribe to us and always leave a comment. We would love to interact with you all, especially when we have important conversations like today's. So Dominic, I would love to hear a little bit about what you're seeing out there in the world of bullying and harassment. It definitely crosses into Title IX work that we do, and civil rights work that we're doing here in the United States. I know that you mentioned global work. What type of work do you do here in the United States, if any? Again, just relating that back to bullying and harassment as a general piece.
Yeah. So, well, one of the things we do is we have a site that we sort of affectionately call the Internet Safe Space. And that's a reference to the fact that so much of the online world, sadly, wasn't built with children's safety in mind. And as a result of that, is not safe for young people. And young people are experiencing harm, experiencing trauma from engaging in much of the online world, actually. Um, and that space is with 20,000 users. So young people will come on. It's like double anonymous. So young people, and that's a protection method basically, because as soon as young people use their real names, as soon as they're using their email address, date of birth, anything that is identifiable, that platform becomes unsafe. Um, we also have the platform overseen by digital safety experts, they're psychotherapists who are able to kind of tap young people on the shoulder if we hear something that worries us and give them one-to-one mentoring support, or if needed, refer them for full 50-minute counseling sessions over a period of time. And young people on our platform will really talk about all sorts and everything. And you get to see running a platform like that, both the kind of commonality of young people around the world, and of course, some of the differences. So this can be for really banal, strange reasons like processor speed, internet speed. And as a result, we have a program in Mexico working with young people. And young people in Mexico tend to use WhatsApp as their kind of social media platform. And part of the reason for that is so much of Mexico does not have high-speed internet. So the kind of scrolling on videos that we're used to in the UK and the US doesn't really work in the same way. So young people are using platforms differently, and as a result, they're getting impacted differently by those platforms. And I think we have to consider this a relatively short-term problem in that platforms are working on building internet. The world is working on building high-speed internet everywhere. So sooner or later, this won't be as different as it is now. We want to look at it now in order to, if you like, have a kind of a case set of right. How is technology impacting young people in these different environments? And that's what we're going to be studying later this year.
Amazing. And so when folks are signing up with Ditch the Label, are they creating an account with you all and then kind of like utilizing your resources? How does it work?
So if you're a young person, say, you would create an account with us. You come on, you join our platform. Your name isn't your name. Your face is a kind of avatar, And as I mentioned before, that blindness is really, really important to safety. You cannot have a safe platform for young people where young people are using their photos and their real names, sadly, because that person will then be trackable elsewhere. So we have quite sophisticated methods of tracking, not just trigger words and that sort of thing, but phrases, and which is sent to our panel for review. We're lucky in that we have people based around the world that can review it in real time, 24 hours a day. The sun never goes down on the platform, if you like. Um, so yeah, so that's the platform, and that's kind of how we engage with young people. If you're a teacher, you would probably know us differently and engage with us totally differently. So we know that young people in schools will sometimes report things to their teachers that they can't tell their parents. And we want the school to be really prepared to deal with that if it comes up. So an issue that we hear a lot from our schools network, sadly, is around digital extortion, and how this issue has spiked recently. So, when I was first talking about digital extortion, you would have to then sort of explain what it was and all this sort of thing. Very sadly, for all the worst reasons, the more and more I'm talking about it, the more people are saying that happened to my niece, that happened to my nephew, my friend, my neighbor. And it's becoming extremely common that young people online are asked for photos and then are extorted on that basis. So we want all schools to know what to do if a disclosure is made. The critical thing is that really reminding young people that this isn't their fault and making sure that you have processes in place to get these images taken down. And then the other thing we do is that we manage that takedown process. So we're a trusted flagger with just about all the major platforms, except for one that has removed their trusted flagger program. And we will then have that content removed for them.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And so the administrators that you work with, what is it that they're like expecting, like for you as a partner? Is it just that they contact you when something like that happens with AI or some sort of sex-based picture? Um,
Ex- Exactly. Yeah. We want them to know, a lot of our work in schools is providing that pathway. So we create a teacher champion that's on the faculty. We create student champions. So you don't even have to go to a teacher if you don't want to. You can report it to one of your peers. There is no perfect system because you're talking about reaching young people when they are in a moment that is about as vulnerable as a young person could ever possibly be. But basically, we want to just create so many touch points within each school that a young person has multiple options of people to go to that know what they're talking about. They also don't have to talk to anyone in their school. They can come to our site and report it anonymously. So there's a lot of different routes. But if children are aware of all the routes, then it gives them options, it gives them decisions. They know they're not going to be in trouble. They know that when they report that image, it can be taken down, not just from the platform it's on, but actually if that person has then gone on to share it on other platforms, there's coding in with those pictures and it can be taken down. We can flag it with Google and it can be taken down across multiple sites. So there are options for young people, but young people believe in that moment. That's what can be really most deadly, to be honest, is that they believe that they have no options at that point.
Well, I love that you're saying that, you provide additional options. I know here working in the US with campuses, I'm the person when I'm working with the campus, I'm constantly, what other avenues are there? It should
Right.
not just be the one office. It should not just be the one office and then an anonymous system that you don't know where it's really going in-house within that campus. And so one of the things I love to do is always introduce advocates on the campus, advocates from, like, let's just say, a rape crisis center that's local, non-affiliated with the campus, to also be an additional option. But knowing your services, I mean, my goodness, that's amazing. Uh, I would assume administrators sign up with you pretty quickly. Um, in the US, do you have any administrators signing up with you?
Do you know, we spoke last week about possibly doing a trial in the US, but we're very, very early in the US at the moment. So our program runs in Mexico, the UK, and it's about to start in Canada. So very, very limited at the moment. But of course, we're hoping to roll it out across all the regions we work in because we really believe that this is going to get worse before it gets better. And we need to build that structure yesterday. We're already too late for so many people, and I say that with an extremely heavy heart. But we need to put this in place as soon as possible.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I know that the cases that come across my desk as an expert witness here for Title IX Consulting Group includes situations where individuals are committing suicide, situations where individuals are running away, and then unfortunately getting exposed to sex trafficking, human trafficking. Um, And so, unfortunately, these cases do escalate to a point where there are topics that we typically don't like to discuss,
Yeah.
where things get. But I think having you all and additional resources like what you're describing here in the United States would be so beneficial. I know
Mm,
that, if there's any way that we can join partnership and help support that work, I would love to do that. I know, for example, with Hassel, I mentioned them to you earlier before we started recording. We're also working on some resources with them to start putting things out here in the United States because
mm,
I truly see how in the UK, in Europe, there are so many wonderful programs that are wonderful, but need to be also adapted here into the US. And the US is such a different animal because we also have a different type of legal system and different regulations. But I do think that it would be very beneficial here.
yeah.
Um, mhm.
Oh, I mean, and to be clear, our trusted flagger status works throughout the world. So we are able to deliver that work. I think it's the slow process of making people aware of it is the bit that requires the programmatic work. So people do make reports from the US currently, and we are able to get content taken down. But what we want is that kind of physical presence as well. Because even as a digital first organizations, I think sometimes it takes someone in front of the young people in order to say, look, I'm here. These are the kind of things that can happen. If it happens to you, you're not in any trouble. Come and talk to us. And it's the combination of those things that's so important.
Absolutely. I know that many times individuals try to press to contact law enforcement. Individuals do not always want to speak to law enforcement. Typically, that might
Yeah.
be the last, organization they want to speak to many times.
Completely. And that's something that law enforcement has to think about as well, because if you called, and I'm speaking a bit about the UK now, but if you call law enforcement, the first thing they'll say is, right, come down to the police station and make a statement. Um, it's quite a big ask, actually, I think, of a young person to put themselves in that kind of position. So I think we have to look at everyone's job throughout this process, from platforms, from law enforcement, from regulators certainly, and say, are we accessible actually to young people when they're in their crisis point? How easy is it for them to get in touch with us? Because I think people look at this as a technology problem, and it really isn't. I mean, we have the technology to provide very safe, very fast routes for young people to make reports anonymously. And actually, a lot of it's an institutional problem. A lot of these institutions don't really think like that and haven't made those routes possible.
Yeah, that's true. Now, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the Epstein files. I know there's a lot going on there through social media and
Mm.
conversations about men. Would love to hear what you're thinking and your thoughts are regarding that and the work that you're doing, the work that we're all doing to try to
Mm.
combat it.
So, child exploitation is something that I think a lot of us fail to talk about because it's difficult to talk about. And we struggle to talk about it for a few reasons. I think, firstly, more people than we will ever know have themselves been victims of exploitation, child exploitation in one way or another. I think, those of us that have children, you can't help but have that child flash in your mind when you're having a conversation like that. And however difficult it is, so important that we do. And I think when I think about Epstein and also the case that came up just about a week ago of the website where men are discussing raping their wives and people in their lives. I think we really have to stop looking at these most horrific crimes even as being something that is minimal and sidelined and occasional. because I think that that framing allows us to think uh, that, firstly, that this isn't very common. Certainly within the people in my life, when I speak to women that I know, it would be impossible for me to believe that this is uncommon in any way. Um, so I think we have to look at it as something that's incredibly normalized, actually, uh, within not just our culture, but within us as human beings, within men particularly. And we have to look at what people do when they attain power and how they choose to use that power. There are no easy answers here because what is being repeatedly enforced is that when people have that level of power, particularly men, are able to use that power in such horrific, exploitative ways for other people without thinking or caring about the long-term impacts on those people. So it's been a really heavy, difficult news process for the last year. The news cycle has been exceptionally difficult. And I've tried to view that positively in a funny way. I've tried to view it as in, thanks to technology, thanks to what's happening, something is being exposed here. And what's really important is that we listen and we do the really tough work of saying, well, now we know what next, what comes next. Um, and I think that the answer has to sit within men, actually, and how we relate to women, how we relate to children. What are we teaching boys about what it is to be a man, and how is that contributing to the world that we have created? Because this is not a political issue. I mean, it's a bipartisan issue, actually. Everyone is supportive of the idea that child abuse is bad. But as soon as you start to talk about, well, maybe maybe the way that we're bringing up men, there's something deeply wrong with that. Feels like it puts you in quite a politicized space. Um, and to that, I'd say, well, look, I'm really up for the conversation. So let's look at how we stop this. I'm not talking about prison sentences and all that kind of incidental stuff that sits on the side. I'm talking about how we create a society that cares for each other, that believes that this stuff is terrible, whether someone's watching you or not, because I think what the internet has exposed is actually if you allow people to be anonymous in certain spaces without safeguards, you really do see the very worst of people. So I think we need to have more conversations about why this is, and we need to look at what we can do to ensure that as people are growing up, and particularly as men and boys are growing up, they have a little more empathy, frankly, for other people. Because I think with empathy, any of this would be impossible. Uh, so yeah, a difficult subject, but that's where I'm up to.
Nice. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And it's something that I've been asking so many of the guests recently is what are your thoughts on the Epstein situation, Epstein files, and especially as you mentioned, thinking about those in power, those that have the authority. I know educating sexual abuse prevention for multiple years, it's always been those in power, those with some sort of authority over another that will always be the perpetrators, that will always be the individuals that are doing the bullying, sexual harassment, sexual assault, that hostile environment, because they feel they can get away with it.
Mm,
And so, now in looking at the Epstein files, it's not surprising that it is always someone in very high positions of power.
mm,
I think the most troubling aspect to me has been that it's not that it's the those in authority, it's the global connection. It is
yeah,
the global system that has been discovered, the extent of that manipulation, uh,
yeah,
that coercion, that, as you mentioned, like there's no empathy there. It is individuals in power just pushing the boundaries as far as they can to get away with as much as they can. And I think you bring up a great question. What is it that men should be doing? What is it that men can be doing? But I wonder, are men listening to that? Are men interested in that? I know some are, but some are not. And so
Mm,
how do you get those men to start listening to that? I don't know if we'll have those answers here today, but it is something that I'm thinking about. And I wonder like what would ditch the label do in that regard to begin to
mm.
address something like that?
So we're looking at a few of these issues in our upcoming piece of research, and we want to do a cut looking at the differences because in the UK and the US certainly, and I think actually in other places around the world, we're seeing a real divide politically in young boys and young girls in schools. So what they believe, what they support. In the UK, young boys are more conservative than their parents, and that's for the first time in many many years that has been found to be true. Um, so I do think that there are some themes that we can look at online that will explain some of this. Um, it's an interesting question, isn't it? We're saying if you can do whatever you want, what do you do, and how do you choose to use that power? Well, most young people can watch whatever they want now, so that's what we've set up. So, what are they watching? How can we make sure that we're using the themes of what they're watching and saying, well, look, how can we be surprised that that are rich and powerful who have the means to do whatever they like choose to do whatever they like when if we look at a microcosm of boys actually we're seeing the same patterns in what people are watching on social media. So I think part of the reason this subject is so hard is there are really no good answers here. And when you get into what I'm saying now, people will say to me, well, are you hating boys? Are you hating men? And that really isn't the case at all. In fact, I have the most, I really believe powerfully that men and boys are almost as damaged by the system as women and girls. Not quite, but there is a significant damage socially that happens to men and boys.
Mhm.
There is
Absolutely.
we, we
Absolutely.
have a society that is creating a kind of psychopathy almost in young people that I think we need to look at very urgently. And the prize for being the prize for not signing up for this is that you get to experience your emotions and you get to experience love on a different level. And I remember, that when I had to go back to work after paternity leave, which in the UK is incredibly short as it is most of the world. I remember feeling this like incredible longing for my daughter, and this like brokenness from being apart from her. And yeah, I'm talking about the most normal thing in the world. I mean, men don't spend much time around their kids. Often, sorry, I know I'm painting with a broad brush here. Um, but I wonder what that does to generations of men, generation after generation, being kind of separated from relationships that are supposed to be fulfilling and loving. I wonder if we want the kind of men that have to go through things like that. Um, and I think it's a really healthy place to start. Is an unhealthy place to start is, men are awful and we have to sort of separate them. But how do we make sure that we're bringing up the kind of men that have the sort of empathy that they need to find this horrific? I mean, we're not talking about a small operation here, and there are, of course, the men that took part, but there are the men that watched, there are the men that heard, there are the men that knew. It is really, really difficult, but I think we need to move on to, okay, well, what next? What's the plan?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so it seems that the next plan, at least for Ditch the Label, is truly that education piece and the resources. Can you share a little bit more about what all the resources are that you have that individuals can use? What's on your website? Is there anything there that folks can utilize at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a number of resources that are sort of school facing to support teachers with issues like digital harm, to allow them to support young people in a whole range of ways with connected issues. So, for example, we've seen kind of pretty much globally, actually, we've seen disordered eating has been climbing, which is the mental condition with the very highest mortality. So that's very, very important to tackle. And again, both through the experience I've had with young people, but also in terms of the research, schools don't really know what to do with this. Doctors hardly know what to do with this in many cases, sadly. So we need to make sure that when those disclosures are made, because they usually are, when you can spot someone that looks like they might be going through trouble, you have what you need in order to support that person. So we're trying to just basically make those conversations as easy as possible, I think. And towards the end of this year, we're doing a piece of research here in the UK with about 20,000 respondents we're hoping for, which is going to look at not just the impacts of the online world on young people, but how those impacts are spread and shared amongst different kinds of young people. So certainly whether they're boys, whether they're girls, whether they're LGBTQ, young people of color, and looking at what the impact is of an online world that has no safeguards and how it impacts different groups of people. That's a really important issue for us. So that's what we'll be looking at the end of this year.
Hmm, great. Dominic, so as I think about Ditch the Label, can you tell me a little bit about the name? What does Ditch the Label actually mean? Why is this the name of the company?
It's funny, so I should say for disclosure that I started as CEO 1st of September last year, so I'm relatively new, and I didn't choose the name. And when I first heard of Ditch the Label, which was probably about 15 years ago, I wasn't sure about the name at all. I'm going to be honest. I wasn't sure about it because I thought, yeah, labels can be important to young people. So LGBTQ young people, of course, will come up with, and I spent a lot of my career in the LGBTQ sector, will really delight in coming up with all sorts of ways to describe themselves and going through a kind of ownership process of saying, look, this is how you refer to me. It becomes very, very important to that young person. So the idea of ditch the label, I was never sort of quite sure about. Um, but I've kind of come round, and I've come round because I was thinking about, what does a perfect society look like, and what kind of society do we want? And I think that these shared terms um, are used out of a place of oppression a lot of the time. James Baldwin said, "We're black because you're white."
Wow.
And it's this idea that we have to have these names, we have to have these identities, because these labels are the things that allow us to come together with people that also share these experiences historically of discrimination. Um, so ditch the label, I suppose, speaks to an ambition and a world where we don't need these labels anymore. And, to be clear, I don't believe that that world exists or will exist. But I think that we still need to work together on what it is we're trying to accomplish here. And I think that that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Amazing. I think that's wonderful. For today, I'm about ready to wrap up our podcast. So I would love to hear any final thoughts you may have for anyone listening out there that are administrators wanting to get additional support services and or
Mm.
thinking about these heavy topics.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is as a theme of our conversation is that young people, in order to report things, firstly, they need to know that they're not going to be in more trouble than when they started. So it's really important to say to young people that, if you're facing something difficult online, it's not your fault, whatever it is. That can be quite different to how we talk about young people. For example, if we spend all morning saying you shouldn't take naked pictures of yourself and put them on the internet, I'm not saying that's a particularly good idea, but if we spend all morning doing that, then the difficulty is that if a young person makes the decision to do that, which actually comes from pretty natural urges, they're going to find it quite difficult to come back to you and say, guess what I did? So we have to balance our advice really, really carefully in this space, I think. And that advice needs to be balanced. If we're saying don't do something, I think it's completely okay to say don't do this. But if you do, here's how you can reduce harm. Here's how you can, if it goes wrong, here's where you can get support. So giving people that kind of all-round package of support is really, really important. I know I have to plug us, but I hope that this is an area where we can genuinely help. So please do remember Stitch the Label. You can find us on social media. You know where to find us. And we want to be on hand to help. The service is completely free. So really for practitioners, for teachers, certainly for lecturers, if they think young people are going through problems, please do pop us a question and we'd be delighted to answer.
Wonderful. Dominic, thank you so much for joining me today and for giving us at least a little bit of better understanding of what Ditch the Label does. And so for today, everyone, thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you the next time.